feel like I'm kind of saying like drink responsibly. It's like watch responsibly. And you can be like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then, whoa, okay, no, I'm not fine. We're calling it binging Netflix. It really could be any streaming service where really what we're going to talk about is, streaming particular kinds of content is what we want to bring to the table. So, and this came about because pretty organically for Kat and I, we have talked about this quite a few times among ourselves. Yeah. So Kat, you like to watch
TV
documentaries. But watch documentaries. Right. I mean, they have a point, right? You're watching shows that have a point. They have a message. They're educational ways. They're informing you. And you're great about sharing them with me when you watch something. Really, gosh, this was good. You might want to check it out. And I inevitably do check it out. So that's how this sort of came to be, because we've noticed certain harmful effects sometimes from watching. So I want to back us up, but I do check to see, I'm just checking my phone, everyone, just to see if she's trying to get back in and she can't. But yeah. So in the meantime, when Natasha comes back, because I feel pretty confident that she will pop up here at some point. In the meantime, because for all of you who are watching, which I don't know, maybe there's none of you. I'm not sure if I'm talking to anyone right now because I don't have YouTube open because I'm not the host. So I'm not checking. So when and if
for those of you who will watch, right?
Yeah. When and if she returns, if we're not just talking to ourselves and there is someone out there and you are typing in questions that you have, she will get to those. In the meantime, again, because this isn't reflective of a pre-recorded conversation, we do have some set questions too that we want to talk about to kind of give a foundation for why we're even here doing this right now. So yeah, if you type in questions, please do that. We're definitely going to want to get to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just appreciate having this conversation with you, Naomi, because I don't know if anyone out there, again, can relate to wanting to be informed and be consuming media that really inspires you. If you are passionate about vulnerable populations, this could relate to your story. Again, with the work that I do with a nonprofit organization that's anti-human trafficking, a lot of some ways that I am able to learn are through documentaries and videos. Like that's how a lot of times that information is best delivered, I suppose, to me. So I think that's why I really enjoy, again, consuming them and sharing them. And I'm sure many people, I mean, obviously things like documentaries that we're going to kind of discuss today, a lot of them go viral because I think they are, they're designed really to, right? They're designed to deliver that information the way people want to spend time with.
Yeah. So again, when we're talking about binging Netflix, you know, our hopefully catchy title for today, we're talking about documentaries and other depictions of real life experiences and how they can be a fantastic way to bring awareness, like Kat was just talking about.
Sorry, I think Natasha said she lost internet. Just an update.
Oh,
there she is.
I'm back. Wow.
You just want to see how we do, right?
Could not have timed that better. Just right when we start, internet decides to go out with no explanation and come back on with no explanation either.
Hey, it happens.
Well, it's fine. We gave a bit of an intro ourselves just as to what we're talking about, why we're talking about it. But if you want to back up and give more of an intro, or go for it.
No, you guys probably did a great job. I trust you with my life. I was just going to jump right into those questions. So
well, go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and we'll get started with question one. We sort of chatted about it a little bit, but not fully. So for everyone who's with us, technical difficulties, we're going to start with question one. I did mention for anyone who's out there, I'm like, I don't have YouTube open, so I don't know if anybody's watching live right now or not. I'm like, if anyone wants to type questions or something, we're certainly still going to answer those. But because this wasn't a pre-recorded conversation, where we do have some preset ones to give people a footing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So first question was, documentaries and other depictions of real life experiences can be a fantastic way to bring awareness to the masses. That's one you already covered, right?
We touched on that. So yeah, we were starting by talking about some pros. Kat was mentioning,
Yeah.
there's some, it provides some good things for her. And I completely agree with what you were saying. It can be a good, helpful way to get information about some very real things that have happened. There have been some more recent options that have come out about things that are still actively going on, like active court cases, things are still really happening. And it's a nice way to get educated. And there's so much that has come out on topics that beEmboldened engages in. So we're talking about various forms of religious abuse. Usually we're going cult specific, or at least very, very culty, very cultish. I mean, pretty darn close if it's not, maybe checking all the boxes depending on the definition you're going on.
Yeah.
Right. I think it just creates, like you were saying, it just creates sort of a leveling foundation for people, for us to begin these conversations, and for people, for awareness to be built. I'll just share a quick story from the documentary. If people have seen, it was, again, another viral documentary from Netflix, Keep Sweet, Pray, Obey. Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey, if you're looking for it. And basically, again, this was very popular, and talked about the FLDS church, and Warren Jeffs, who is the head of that. And again, he is in prison, but he's still running this cult, essentially. And so basically, I live in Wisconsin. So I believe that was all taking place really in Texas and Utah, from what I remember. And what was interesting was, we actually at Fierce Freedom, again, we are a nonprofit that we're anti-human trafficking. We spread awareness. We have been around in the community that we're serving in for over a decade. So we had one of our sponsors who does a lot of events with us, is a property manager. And this was really interesting that they shared this with us, that they had, in a kind of more rural area than, I live, it's pretty close by. But basically, they had a request for housing from 4 women that he was able to being part of FLDS, or because of the documentary Stay Sweet, Pray, or Keep Sweet, Pray, Obey, and his staff members were actually, they had seen the documentary and was able to determine, based on some pretty obvious like red flags, that this is kind of what was going on. And then from that rental application, he actually saw that their employer was Seth Jeffs, which is actually Warren Jeffs' brother. So again, kind of putting those pieces together, he was able to do that because his staff was alert to it. And then they connected with us. And then because my boss knew about my involvement with beEmboldened, Naomi, we talked about it. So unfortunately, he wasn't able to do much at this time for them. And he did not rent to them because they didn't meet the income requirements. But again, it's great that they were able to even make those connections. And that's because of a very viral documentary that many people have seen.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that ability to allow for these mental connections. The situations can be different, but there's similarities. There's similar threads as we watch these different documentaries, and as we at Bolden just live it, between those who are on our team, from volunteers to staff to those that we serve. I mean, we see these commonalities. And what's really powerful, I've heard this from different clients, is they'll watch one of these documentaries and they will feel less, quote unquote, crazy. And I don't mean that in a derogative way. That is usually the word that people use. And they'll even hesitate, but they're like, that's the best way I can describe it. It's like, I feel crazy. And that's what can happen when we're experiencing gaslighting and things like that, right? That's the common language people were using. Like, I feel crazy. I feel I have all this evidence, but I'm like, but that can't be true. And so there's this disconnect going on, when in reality, they're probably right. They're probably not the ones that are crazy. What they experienced just should not be. It's outside of the normal realm of happenings that shouldn't be. And so people can feel like, I've got to be misinterpreting this, because like, how could this be happening? And unfortunately, it happens a lot more than people may realize. And I think these documentaries help to highlight that fact. So yeah, I mean, we have people that we serve who are like, gosh, I watch this and I feel less isolated. I feel like I can connect with their experience. Even though there's differences, there are similarities. And I also really appreciate that aspect for people who have similarly suffered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the awareness and the education just goes to show how important that is and what a difference that makes, which is a lot of what beEmboldened does, is raising that awareness in order to prevent, to cause those connections to be made, so that people lives can be impacted positively for that.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some great positives. Anything else you want to add there before we talk about maybe some of the negatives?
No, I mean, yeah, again, it's like I was saying, it's just like the conversations might be easier to have all around. So maybe somebody that's been impacted or somebody that is seeing something, they're going to feel, I think, more empowered because, there's sort of a broader conversation that everyone's having, like, have you seen this documentary? And it's a great jumping off point. So yeah, definitely. There's definitely positives to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to talk about some of the ways it's great to see those connections being made, but there's also some ways in which we've seen culture use these shows to increase the divide versus connection. So the divide that's happening, even if it's unintentional. So, Kat, I know you had talked about uh, just denominations and religious practices, kind of lumping those all together in a category. Do you have,
Yeah.
something you'd like to share on that?
Yeah, I guess my thought on the ways it's divisive is, is there an ability or is it encouraged in these documentaries for the audience who's watching them to make a distinction between, those abusive religious practices that are touting the name of God and those actual authentic Christ-centered religions? Because, are they all just, I guess, like an example where that I actually liked seeing was there was a Netflix documentary called Sins of Our Mother. And again, I think it was a branch of FLDS that a woman basically ended up believing herself to be, I would say, a prophet, but it's sort of like almost a goddess, like a godlike entity. So she sort of went off and, talked about, like, she met somebody and essentially they ended up sort of talking about, like, it was kind of like reincarnation and how they were sort of bringing in, the new revelation and things like that. And so
may I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
I just want to say, for anyone who maybe is playing this, even if it's on a replay, if you do have kiddos around or anything like that, I would caution you, because we are going to reference some things that are tough. So of course, as with anything that beEmboldened puts out, I would always give a trigger warning that the topics we talk about can be triggering. They can be very, very difficult. They can bring back bring things up for you, but also be careful of just, little ears that are around, because it may be something that's not best for them to hear. So yes, with that, Kat, please continue.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, and just take breaks as well from anything that we're talking about. Like, we're going to mention, how do we binge and how do we listen to this well? Or is binging even the best thing to do? But yeah, like with the Sins of Our Mother, that maybe some people have seen. And again, Naomi, I want to hear your thoughts on even that series, and if you would recommend it, because I remember we both kind of struggled with that one. Like, there was some real demonic parts of it that were very hard to digest and very hard to watch and troubling. So I would also say that too, just ahead of people wanting to watch that. But what I did like about it was that they did have a prophet, like a real, I would say, like real prophet, essentially a woman that did seem very eccentric. So there is that eccentricity that you're like, I don't know about this person, but she did consistently kind of give glory back to God. Like, she didn't take that for herself. She was comparing how this woman, the mom in the situation, she sort of like kind of went off and believed that she was a goddess, like a godlike entity. But then they had sort of a real prophet who was speaking about how, well, this is actually what, the book of Revelation says. So they sort of had a distinction there. And then also, the son of the mom also, he was a Christian, and so he to me was really the bright spot of the whole series, because again, like I said, there's some demonic stuff going on with this mom, but her son really, I think, did embrace true and authentic faith, and so you really could feel that and see that, and they allowed that to be shown. It wasn't just sort of like a, we're going to lump all religions into one category. They're all negative. There's all these negative experiences, right? So it shows the negative experiences, but it also shows the distinction of like truth, I think, in there. So yeah, and I'd be curious too to hear, Naomi, if you kind of saw that when you watched it too.
Yeah, there wasn't this anti-faith agenda.
Right.
I didn't see that in it. No, it really seemed like it was trying to stick to, this is what happened. And there were actual audio recordings and things like that, where it's like, okay, this really is just trying to show the story of what really was. And I think I've seen that overall. I haven't really gotten that sense from any that I've watched. And now I have not watched them all. So, some of you may disagree. You might be like, I watched this one. There was definitely an agenda there about just anti-religion period, or anti-faith, spirituality, Christianity specifically. And I have not come across that in any of these. And so I do appreciate that they're taking more of that lens of, hey, we're trying to showcase what happened. Now, of course, not every story is going to have that direct polarization like we saw in this one with the son, where we saw that he came to Christianity and we got to see a difference. Sometimes we don't have that. And so, yes, people can be left to kind of make their own decision. And I could see where it could maybe emphasize like, people who are of faith are nuts, or people who are of faith are awful people, or things always go awry, and religion is the root of all problems, and kind of heard it all. And religion can cause there are a lot of problems that can come out of that, but I would certainly argue that it's the people who are in it that are causing the problems, not the faith itself. So just that that's an important distinction. So yeah, I would agree with you, Kat. I haven't come across that concern, but I definitely have concerns about potential consequences of binging. And I'm going to set aside maybe binging itself for the moment, like outside of binge, just these documentaries in general, this kind of information being brought to us in general. One of the concerns I have is the sensationalism that can come. So I think when we're watching something like this, and our goal is education, our goal is to build bridges. It's to connect with people, better understand, better relate, maybe just know that we're not alone. Maybe we personally relate in certain ways, because something I very much believe in, and I've seen proven true over and over again, is that even if our stories are different, our emotional responses can bring us together. We can have a similarity in those kinds of experiences. And so there's power there, and it can be really, really beneficial. But if we're watching real trauma and real tragedy for entertainment, then I'm concerned.
Right.
So now we've crossed into a different area. And I think when we're seeing these depicted, we can lose touch with the fact that those are real people in real lives that have been absolutely destroyed. And that sensationalism I've seen increase the divide rather than decrease it. So I think it's something for us to be aware of and to consider. Am I watching all of this in such a way that I'm losing touch with the fact that these are real people? Am I feeling a call to action? Is something going on where there's forward motion of, I want to make a difference here. I want to be a part of this. I want to connect. I want to serve. I want to be more aware to who's renting my properties. I want to be whatever that looks like. Or is it, wow, I'm sitting here eating popcorn. I'm like, this is just fascinating. People are really like this. This is crazy. That is where I start to really get nervous.
Yeah. And you have to remember that like the producers of the shows, they have an agenda, right? Like they are trying to get you to binge and to watch. Like I don't want to like assume their motives, but it's kind of like with any marketing like that people are doing, like those like bigger companies, like Target is trying to sell you something, right? Like even if you feel really good about it, like they're trying to sell you something, they're trying to get you to watch. So that's why you need to be, like you said, a very informed consumer, and kind of be checking in with yourself. Like, what am I getting out of this? You know, like, what
Mhm.
is my goal in consuming this, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just kind of taking I'm losing the word right now, but just checking in, like you said, with yourself and finding, is this further humanizing or is this dehumanizing people
Right.
in their mind? And I have lived that response. So I can get pretty hyped up about this conversation. I get pretty passionate about it because I've absolutely had people hear my story or bits of it and respond with just fascination.
Mm.
And it can make me feel, it can kind of give this feel of like you're some sort of like freak in some way. Again, I'm not trying to use that in a derogatory, like that's what it can feel like. Like, what are you saying? Like, I'm not, there's something like inherently wrong with me, or, um, and it can really increase that divide and just no compassion.
Mhm.
It's like, gosh, there's no connection that like, yeah, it is crazy that happened to me. But you want to know what's worse? The depth of the pain, some of
Mm-hmm.
which I'll carry for the rest of my life in some
Mhm.
form.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what the holidays are supposed to look like versus what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what it looks like raising a kid versus, without any extended family.
Mm-hmm.
But, let's talk about the reality of this stuff. So, the struggles with lineage, that, all kinds of things that come up, like day-to-day functioning that people struggle with. And so instead they're seen as just what happened to them versus who they are.
Mhm.
Right. And it kind of reminds me too of like just the national broadcasts of like even just like things that we have so much information all the time, and we are desensitized to it. And I feel like a lot of times we just feel kind of bad for a little while, and then we don't do anything because it's like we just sort of, again, it becomes about us, and we don't. So it's like, are you willing to watch that as a property owner or something? And then what is your policy? What's that follow through going to look like for you to do? Are you willing to actually change your behavior in a way that would actually help a survivor get the help that they need, get housing, right? To help them get free from this situation. Like, are you willing to change, or are you just, to me, I would just kind of ask that question. Like, are you willing to donate to something like beEmboldened, kind of putting your money or your time or resources into that rather than just sitting and kind of, not doing much about it. I guess I would ask people to think, what is that action step going to look like for me? And if you're not willing to do something, then I wonder why you're really watching it.
Yeah.
That's kind of bold to say, but I don't know.
And it's incredible what people live through. And so recognizing that part too of, okay, where's the empowerment?
Yeah.
Where's the, oh my gosh, this is incredible what you've come out of, that you're standing here, so we don't want to turn people into, like, we don't want them to be stuck in this victimized state either. It's amazing what people overcome.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I mean, I fully attribute that to Christ in my life, that I'm where I am right now. Whatever that looks like for you out there where you're watching, it can be really incredible to look back and be like, wow, I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I seem to somewhat have it together. Wow. Okay. How did that happen? And so we don't want to keep people either in this box of, oh, wow, I saw this documentary and you came out of something similar, or maybe you came out of that exact same group that I saw a documentary on. And now I'm kind of attributing all of these identity pieces to who you are. Yeah. It's like, well, we still need to get to know that specific person. But yeah, we can know a bit more about what they went through. We have a framework from which we can ask questions, and we can learn more about their specific experience of what happened. So again, we have this framework of, okay, this is the group. This is generally what goes on. Was this true for you? Like, or did you not? Some stuff that, like, if you ask my story versus my brother's story versus my friend Liz, who came out of the group, we have slightly differing stories. And that's because boy versus girl for my brother and I, daughter of the cult leader versus not for my friend and I. And so when I'm talking about that truth of experience, I'm like, I mean, here's the general overview of the group, but it looked a bit different for me than it did for her, than it did for him. And so we want to still talk to the person directly and learn more.
Absolutely. I wish that these documentaries and this content that's being produced ended with that note, like ended with how can we actually empower people to make a difference. So it seems like there's a great lack of opportunity there for those who are producing these shows and content to leave it without leaning into honoring those experiences and what people have lived through and empowering the viewers to take a next step that actually makes a difference.
Yeah. And I think as an example, Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey, I loved how they ended it because they gave these updates that were so hope-filled and encouraging. And we saw, wow, look at these women are now. Like, no, this isn't all done for them. That would be an unrealistic expectation. But look at where they're at now. It's very inspiring. You're right, though. There wasn't like a call to action or anything. It would have been a great opportunity for one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We'll kind of get to, sorry, also I was grabbing my charger. I'm sure you said so many amazing things, Naomi, and I'll watch them later. But I think like the way that ended really was, I loved how that ended too. And I think that you're right. It did show like, wow, what a massive amount of like, how much more do some of these women have to go through, but also like how brave they were. And it was really emotional. And so I mean, I had to take a moment and really like process all of that. I remember. So we'll kind of get to that a little bit later, talking about, grieving it and like, what does that look like? But yeah, that I did love how it ended, and it felt very empowering, right? Like it felt like they were showing the strength of these women that were, survivors of it.
Well, I have here in my notes that we're supposed to do some introductions, but I think you may have already covered those. Is that right?
No, we just started talking like we're famous and everybody knows who we are.
Well, then.
My last name is Kardashian.
Kat Kardashian. I like it. Well, for those who don't know,
no, thanks.
Kat's last name is not Kardashian. It is, in fact, it's Morgan. But Kat is a community program specialist for Fierce Freedom, which she also mentioned earlier. That is an organization focused on human trafficking, but she also serves as the vice chair for beEmboldened, and working with that organization, Fierce Freedom, actually gives her the opportunity to speak to thousands of people about the realities of domestic human trafficking. And she loves having those conversations, especially how they lead to individuals finding their own role in that fight for justice. So what she does 40 hours a week definitely ties into her service with beEmboldened, which is so awesome to see. In fact, I know we had a great conversation with Megan Lundstrom about the intersection between cult abuse and human trafficking. So you'll definitely want to check that out if you haven't already watched that YouTube episode. I am the board chair, so I get to work closely with Kat and Naomi. And I am excited to be part of these conversations. And of course, Naomi, if you haven't already gotten to know her, she's got a great video explaining her story, but she's, of course, our founder and executive director. And as she mentioned, the daughter of a pseudo-Christian cult leader, and how she came out of that is pretty incredible. So you should check out that video of her story. But she holds a master's in social work and is working on a master's in Christian studies from Denver Seminary, and is very passionate about the hope that comes from embracing those challenges, to lean in to working through these things that we have experienced, and knowing that a real fulfilling life is possible. So that's why we do what we do. And beEmboldened does exist for those impacted by religious trauma. We provide support for prevention of victimization and revictimization, and we create that safe space to ask questions and to heal, which is what we hope our live stream today is for you, as well as our content and resources. So with that being said, we are a nonprofit, and what we're doing really depends on the generosity of people like you. So if you care about this and about religious abuse, preventing that and providing support for those who are healing, I'd invite you to donate. We have so much going on, expanding our reach in 2023 very strategically to improve what we're doing, expand our awareness, and increase our direct service to more individuals. We're already doing that through serving over 100 people this year with mentoring, and we will use those funds that you give to make sure that more people can get those direct services that are actually making a real impact. So invite you to be part of that amazing team of volunteers and donors moving this mission forward. I'll add some links to the chat for you to click on and check out how to donate and resources to check out. But we also invite your questions in our chat. So thanks for putting those in, and please feel free to ask your questions. So we have Kat and Naomi live here. It's a great opportunity to dig deeper into this topic. So moving on to some more questions that we have prepared here. Binging content of this nature has some really real risks to the viewer and listener. We've already talked about some of those potential negative impacts, but I'd love to talk about maybe some spiritual impact, Naomi. So what would you have to say about that?
Whew. Okay, so we're going to get into some tips, some things to consider, but I have learned that I need tips. I need rules of thumb. I need kind of best practices for myself in order to be able to deep dive into some of this content. So yes, I mean, day to day, I have the true privilege to engage with people about their stories, what they've experienced, the harm, what they are currently walking through and rebuilding their lives and figuring out what is true, what do they believe, how do they function day to day, what's next for them. So there can be, of course, a heaviness to that. I feel it. And I'm glad I do. I think if at some point I don't at all, it's probably time to step away. So because these need to remain very real to me. And similarly, when I go and I watch one of these documentaries, it's very real to me. And again, I'm encouraging people to connect with that themselves. Now, someone might be like, well, it's not very real to me, so I watch it because it's interesting. Like I said, that's still something to press pause on and be like, okay, wait. I'm not really connecting the fact that these are very real people. And again, I think that that's important to do so. It's kind of the point of a documentary, is so that we can connect and we can understand, we can learn, we can hopefully stop it from happening. So the potential harm is overload. Vicarious trauma is real. When we watch something, especially that visual component, when we're seeing it play out, as we do in some of these documentaries, some of these stories. I know there was a show that came out recently where they didn't necessarily do it in documentary format. It was like really playing it out, actors and actresses playing it out. And it's like, oh my goodness, like the psychological impact. So when we see these stories brought to life, these real life experiences brought to life on the big screen, mine's not that big, maybe yours is, but so when we see this happen, that visual can absolutely lead to vicarious trauma, where if we are really connecting with it, it can impact us so much. We're imagining that it's us. That's something we don't actually want to do. That's taking it too far. So if anyone's listening to me and they're like, well, I'm not really connecting with it, don't go as far as imagining that child who was murdered was your son. That's taking it too far. We don't witness all of that stuff for a reason. If we do, but this is not like where we want to go and witness everybody else's thing and that kind of tangibility where we're like, gosh, I'm imagining this is literally me so that I can connect. And now I'm feeling traumatized. The brain is really powerful. And so again, that's a real thing. And so we don't want to take it that far. These visualizations can lead us there though. And so when we're watching these and we're binging and we're doing hours of content, and I mean, that one that you referenced, Kat, The Sins of a Mother, I mean, that was only 3 episodes of about an hour each. That was only like 3 hours. I couldn't sleep that night. Like, it messed me up. And I was kicking myself because I already know better. But I'm like, oh, it's only 3 hours. Like the total amount of time wasn't super significant. And I got like halfway through, so about 1.5 hours, 1.5 episodes. And I knew, I kind of just felt it. I'm like, I need to just shut it off. And when I shut it off, it's going to be for a while. I just know that about myself. So there's some personalization here that's important. But I didn't do it. And I watched all 3 hours and I'm like, I felt like I was creeped out. Like it was like spiritually, I felt incredibly unsteady. I felt unsafe. I couldn't sleep well that night. I just had this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like, am I safe? Is my house safe? Is my kiddo safe? Is my just like really impacted me. It took away that just rootedness and that sense of peace and safety that I have in my faith in Christ. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to just like, I need to go read my Bible. I need to. And that is a very real thing that can happen when we are taking in whatever too much looks like for us. So again, knowing that gauge for ourselves of, okay, when is this getting to be too much? Too much can also look like desensitization, like we kind of talked about in the beginning. Like maybe you are connecting, you're like, wow, like I know that this is real. And then you're watching so much of it that it just neutralizes it for you. That can be too much. And it may just be too much in a certain time frame. So there's different ways that this can look. But yeah, I have absolutely learned that I cannot take in what that line is for me of too much, or it could take me days to recover.
Mm. Yeah. I think too, like Naomi, I feel like even just like that specific incident where I had kind of told you about that documentary, like I think I'm coining this term because I've never heard it before, like being a non-consensual show sharer, right? Or information sharer. So I think if people listening or watching this, like if you're anything like me, maybe this isn't your specific background, right? Like for me, like I've had levels of some spiritual abuse, I would say, but this specifically like was gross to watch. And there were like parts of it that were really tough, but I wasn't triggered in the same way because it's not my story. And so just again, being a non-consensual show share is like wanting to process so much and wanting to feel, maybe even like connecting with someone who would get it. Right. So for me, it's like realizing like, I need to think about the audience I'm sharing this with. And asking the question of like, is my desire to process this right now, is that really the best thing? Is this the person I should be processing this with? Right. So even like my husband, Zach, he has had some real religious abuse in his past. So basically, a family member would, and he again was totally fine with me sharing this. We talked about it, but he was really deeply disturbed by the documentary as well, like and things that I had shared a little bit as I was processing it with him. Basically had a family member who really justified even violent acts with religious like justification. And basically Zach was saying that this is sort of like it's just so harmful because somebody, it's not really just someone that knows what that they're doing is harmful. Maybe it's just someone who's doing harm, but they're justifying it with their beliefs, so it's evil compounded. So even the person like the cult leader or the person that's in the documentary, they are even deceived as well. So it's just like there's just so much darkness there, I guess. So again, going back to just being like loving each other well means that we know when to share or what to share, right? Like we know how to process so that we're not unintentionally traumatizing somebody else. Again, like if you're someone like me who is a verbal processor, like finding that, therapist or journaling or like, what does that look like for you? And like you were saying, Naomi, like those like smaller bites of how are you, if you are just so distraught and you are just like, ugh, I need to process this right now. Like maybe you need to step back from it. Like maybe that's a good indicator that you've consumed a lot and you need to just be gentle with yourself. But again, like being loving to those around you as well. So don't re-traumatize other people just because you really want to process it. Like if you need to do that, you need to have something in place. Like you were saying, Naomi, like have something in place before you go into it so that you know a little bit of like the plan of like what happens when, pretend that it's just going to happen. Pretend that you're just going to have something traumatic that you see. And then what does that look like? Kind of safety planning ahead of time, I would say.
Yeah, I love preparedness plans. So I think that's a great idea. And with that specific incident, I know, like, Kat, I don't know if you can still hear me, you froze, but I know that you felt so bad because I had a tough night after it, but I was fully informed. Like, that I take 100% responsibility. Like, I knew that I should have stopped, and I'm like, "Oh, it'll be fine." Wasn't fine. So that was definitely on me. Like, I've had enough experience in that regard at this point where, yeah, it just didn't need to be. Is she coming back? Did we lose her completely?
I think we may have lost her.
Okay.
Cat joined.
Oh. And she's back.
It's the video that has all the technical difficulties.
Well, and
It
also,
must be
you guys,
me. It's because I joined. I don't know.
I also just realized I'm talking to this mic this whole time. It's not even plugged in. So can you guys hear me
I
okay?
can hear you great.
Yeah.
I can hear you
Okay.
just fine.
I mean, I just plugged it in, which is probably a bad idea. Who knows what's going to happen now?
Well,
Ooh,
what
colors.
happened that hasn't already happened?
I know. So do I sound different?
Actually, no. So
Okay. Maybe it's not
maybe-
working. We'll
I mean,
Your
continue
voice is
on.
really high now. No, I'm just kidding. Helium?
So yeah, Kat, I was just saying, I mean, I take full responsibility for that because I knew what I was getting into. As I started watching it, you kind of get the feel real quick with that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really launches you right into it. And I knew, like I said, I had that response of telling me, okay, it's time to press pause for the night, and I ignored it. And so that was my consequence for a poor choice.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard because it's like, I think the goal is like, we don't want to traumatize anyone. So it's like, if you're taking care of yourself and if you're also thinking about others, like, I think it's just, that will be extra insulation. And like, I don't know, something I've started to do is just ask the question. Cause even with just my work with learning about sex trafficking, and I'm like, this is horrible. I actually had at Thanksgiving, I was talking about something recent, and I think it was like abuse within the Amish community that I had been learning about. So sexual abuse within that. And then I started talking about it at the dinner table. And I said to my brother, do you want to hear this? And he said, not really. And I said, okay. So, just like knowing that, especially like, I don't know, like, since we're going to be interacting with family and stuff like that, like it's good to just ask the question of like, hey, is it okay if I share this before you do? I mean, it's hard to do that, but like, if you kind of start the practice, I think it gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. And sometimes it's just the time of day. Like, there's sometimes where my husband's going to come to me and he's like, hey, I read this, or I'm like, I'm at capacity for today. Send me an email. Like, I know we're married. Send me an email. Like, I'll open it when I can open it. But yeah, I can't take any more in today. Natasha, you're laughing because you're like, yeah. He'll just keep going.
Send me a Marco Polo.
He's limitless. Yeah, he'll just keep going. I'm like, no, like, I gotta stop it. Yeah, I need to take in something else.
Gotta go. Yeah,
it's important.
It's fair. It's fair.
Yeah. So I mean, where does that leave us here? I mean, we what are some recommendations to consider so that we can become informed and care about this, but in a healthy way?
Yeah. So first, I flat out would avoid binging. And when I'm talking about binging, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch this whole series. That's usually what binging is. It's like I'm pretty much taking in as many episodes as I can during my waking hours in consecutive days. Like,
right.
I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think it's harmful to you, either because you're totally disconnected. I think that's harmful. Or if you are connected, how is that really impacting you? How many days is it going to take you to recover? So I am very intentional, usually, other than that mishap recently, about counterbalancing with goodness. So I'm like, I am taking in, and this happens, you guys. I mean, depending on what you do for work or just what your interests are, where your passions are, what your past experience has been. So if you're trying to learn more about what you've lived through personally, we can go into these really deep dives. It's like, this is all I'm taking in. I am researching. I've heard this from different writers. A friend of mine, Lindsay Mendenwall, she writes on world religions. She's like, she literally like, pray for me, guys, if I'm doing a deep dive on this specific situation, because you're taking in so much in a shorter period of time. And it's very destabilizing. So I recommend counterbalancing with goodness. That can look like scripture, if that is something you are able to do at this time. I know sometimes it takes some time to take some steps to get there. If you have experienced religious abuse, if that is an option for you, for me, it is incredibly, incredibly helpful. Scripture and prayer. Absolutely. Beauty. I very much connect with the reality of God and his goodness through beauty, through creation. Beauty to me is music, beautiful music, candle, soft lighting, creation, nature. There's a variety there. So I want to take in those things. Humor, laughing can be helpful. Remembering to be lighthearted, having someone crack a joke, finding a movie where you already know it's funny. So you're like, this is my go-to. Like, I know I'm going to laugh at this one. So bringing those things in, and if something is sticking with you and impacting your functioning, talking to someone to diffuse it, like Kat, you mentioned. So we don't want to hold it inside. That's just going to give it more influence. It's going to give it more power. It's going to kind of fester. So if we're like, gosh, this is really weighing on me, there are definitely times where I need to call someone. I need to go to my husband. I need to contact someone else. I need to schedule an appointment with my therapist. Be like, I'm ruminating on this one. Like, this really impacted me in a really deep way, maybe probably totally unexpected if I just didn't have that preparedness plan specifically going into it, but I have the kind of general preparedness plan. So yeah, like you were saying, Kat, I mean, if you know you're diving into something, you might set up like more specific steps specified to that. But if you're not on the researcher side, you're not working in this area, you're probably less apt to need something maybe that specific. Instead, you may have general steps of, okay, if I get really seriously, like legit triggered by this and it is really impacting me, what are my options here? And again, breaking it up. So my typical, what I should have done for that content, the sins of your mother specifically, keep sweet, pray, and obey. I still spaced out, and then I watched the documentary on Peacock. I don't know if did you ever go and watch that one with Naomi?
I remember you mentioned it, but yeah, I haven't gotten to that.
Yeah, that one, you have to sign up for Peacock, but it's worth the $5 for that month to go and watch it. I will say though, it's upsetting. So for anyone it's upsetting, because it was very evident that there was a lot that was still in her head. And some of, still embodied by some of the people in that documentary. So it was hard to watch because it's heartbreaking.
And it was Naomi Jeff's. So that was Warren Jeff's wife, right?
The one who was on the run with him. Yeah. Right. So she has not spoken. And so this was her coming forward and sharing, and she's obviously come a long way, and I commend her for it. It's really impressive. And yet at the same time, I can see the next steps, and where to head, hopefully for further healing. And it's just, it's hard to see. It's painful to see people in pain. So with that series of like Sins of Your Mother, and even what I did, like I was saying with those two, is I space them out. So even if I want to keep going, I do this with podcasts, I do this with research, like anything where I'm going to be taking in a lot in total, I will force myself to give it 2 to 3 days in between episodes. So it's not even just I'm going to watch one a day. I fully let myself come out of the impact of it, and then I'll go back into it, because I know otherwise it compounds for me. So if I've still got some residual from the day before, it's going to compound, and over the 4 or 5 days or whatever it is, it's going to become overwhelming. So I'm like, I have to wait till I've totally like internally reset before I can go back to the next episode. So it takes me time. There can also be a difference though for me, at least, but arguably I would think this would be kind of generalized in knowing the power of the visual component to reading versus the visual. But if you're a very visual person and as you're reading, you're visualizing it all, it might not make a difference. So again, kind of gauge that for yourself. I can go back and forth. So if I'm researching something, I'll be looking at a documentary, I'll spread that out, but in between I may still be reading things. But again, I'm not taking in more of that than I'm taking in goodness, beauty, again, whatever that's going to look like for a specific person.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. I just saw Michael had a question. Do you think these shows happen more frequently with cults and not so much sex trafficking? That's a great question, Michael. Should I talk about my recommendations, or should I answer that first? What do you guys, maybe I'll just answer that. So I do think that from my, and this is again because I'm really much immersed in learning about trafficking, so this could be just me. I do think that there is more like media that has been coming out that is focused a little bit more on sex trafficking. I know there is Rebecca Bender, who is a survivor leader, amazing woman. She is coming out with a Showtime show. But it's based again on her life. So it's very much real. It's not really like a documentary style though. It's more, just like a drama. So, yeah, I guess I would be curious again, like I know you guys explored the link between sex trafficking and cults, but I completely see the link, and I would love, I feel like there is so much overlap. It would be really interesting for someone to come out with a documentary about that. I mean, if you're thinking about the coercion that's going on, people trying to leave a cult, it's basically like that's their trafficker, because that's the person that has provided for them, and that's where their family ties are, and there's manipulation. So yeah, but as far as there are more shows about cults or documentaries coming out than sex trafficking, I don't know. I think for me, I've seen quite a few. I've seen quite a few shows about sex trafficking, and I know that there are some more coming out. I do think that sex trafficking is kind of a hot button topic right now too. Like even when my executive director first started Fierce Freedom, there was less talk about it. So I think generally it seems like there is more talk. I'm not sure if there's more about cults or, but again, there is such an overlap there. So I think somebody should really dive into that more.
Yeah, absolutely. And because the other way it can look is familial trafficking, potentially within an actual religious cult. So sometimes it's cult-like, kind of like you were talking about, where it's like it functions like a cult. And sometimes it is also a straight up religious cult. And this is one of the activities going on within it. And I've absolutely, seen and heard some of that. And my own situation, I came out of it, it certainly had that flavor to it of grooming of women to marry way older men, like 40 years older than them. So yeah.
Even at some point, I think I was just going to say just really quickly about that too. Even in Keep Sweet, Pray Obey, there is a comment that one of the investigators makes and said, this is basically like the largest sex trafficking ring in the US because Warren Jeffs is using young girls, and he is basically he's the prophet, he's the gatekeeper that so people are able to older men are able to have those younger brides, and then using labor trafficking for those young men. So again, I mean, they definitely did highlight that as well in that documentary. If you were looking for it, you could definitely see it. So yeah, thank you for that question, Michael. That's a really great question. And I guess too, like Naomi, I totally agreed with just balancing again when we're consuming this with goodness, and knowing like what you need and kind of having that safety plan ahead of time. I would also just add, like, with those emotions that are going to come up, like it is good to feel that. It is good to weep and to lament. Again, with Keep Sweet, Pray Obey, that last scene where one of the women, she tells her story about leaving, and it was just really, really told well and really stirred up emotion in me, and sort of a melancholy feeling of like, wow, she has to start over. Like, what is that going to look like? That's really scary, right? And so like with any of these, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling just so sad because you're seeing this depravity of humanity, we're like, I totally get that. And it's so important that you are lamenting that. And it is good. It is good to process that. And, you know, like we're saying with this, binging is probably not a good option. You know, like having like stuffing yourself on a meal is going to maybe feel good at the time, but you're going to have to deal with those consequences of like overeating. So think of it that way, and just having those like smaller bites so that you can process them. You know, you're not, I would say this, it's like you're not a more noble person if you're just like powering through and like taking it all at once. Like it doesn't make you more noble. It doesn't make you more noble to not rest and to not like honor what you need. You need to honor that in yourself. So yeah, those are just some other thoughts that I was having as far as like people that are wanting to, you know, like, well, I still want to be informed and I still want to maybe consume this kind of content. That's totally fine. But like we were talking about, maybe checking your priorities a little bit and also checking how you're doing that. And I mean, with things like this, like they are real people, like you were saying, Naomi. So you do have to treat the subject matter with respect. And you have to, again, realize like, what is that impact going to be for you? And then also the people around you that, you know, you may want to share that with, but doing that in a way that's, again, not going to re-traumatize and not going to sensationalize.
Yeah, I very much appreciate what you said about allowing yourself to have the feelings and to grieve, to let the emotion out, to cry, to journal, to share with a person. Again, you know, ask them if they're in an okay place for you to share, in case maybe it connects to them in some way too. But, and I know you had a note too about, you know, rest as a discipline.
Yeah.
You know, as like a self-discipline of, yeah, you know, I'm going to take a break. And it is hard. Like, again, I didn't for those 3 episodes. And it's like, I should have just taken the break and had a rest from it and then circled back to it when it was an okay time to do so. And sometimes we do get into something and we don't realize how it's impacting us. And so if you think you're fine, I would still have a rule of thumb of like, I'm not going to do more than a couple episodes without taking a break, because I might not know in the moment how it's impacting me. That might catch up to me a few hours after I stop. So again, in the moment you're like, oh wow, I'm fine, I was into this. And then it's like, oh, and it's too late. I feel like in my mind, I have a comparison to alcohol. So if anyone out there, you know, has had too much before or knows someone who has, or just generally educationally knows what that can look like, I feel like I'm kind of saying like, drink responsibly. It's like, watch responsibly. And you can be like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then, whoa, okay, no, I'm not fine. Like that was too much. And so just know I'm not going to go ahead and binge the whole thing, because I just might not realize how this is impacting me on a deeper level. So I'm going to pause and take a break.
Yeah. And even just like, I mean, you could even have like a friend who you like, if you like, I just met a girl who was at my church. She loves documentaries and we were talking about documentaries. So it's like, find somebody. And, you know, maybe it's even like almost like accountability. Like maybe you're watching the show at the same time and you both have decided like, we're going to do this responsibly. So like, you literally can't get ahead of them, because that you don't want to be that jerk that like watches the show without your friend, right? Like I have shows that I watch with my husband, and if I watch ahead, I feel really guilty about it. So even just like maybe make it like you're going to do this with a friend or someone you care about. And so that person even could, you know, not that it's their responsibility, but just like you have another person to consider as like, I'm not going to binge because we have set this, you know, we've set this out together. So I don't know. That's just an idea. If that's something that, you know, if you have a pal that you want to kind of, and maybe that's a person you could process with a little bit too.
Yeah. And sometimes as we're doing that, like even talking with you now, I've realized like, oh yeah, like I've done this and I've done that. And so being able to talk it through can just bring other kind of subconscious things to the conscious. So we can realize like, oh, okay. For example, when my husband and I were watching Banner of Heaven together, and that's a bit of a longer one. But we kept watching it at night because that's after, you know, my son's in bed. And I realized about halfway through, I'm like, it doesn't really matter how many days in between. I just don't sleep well afterwards. I mean, it's a horrific tragedy what happened in that family. And so, I mean, it's haunting. Like I feel sick right now just thinking about it. I chose to watch it for a specific reason. So again, I had a reason to do it. It wasn't entertainment. It was like, no, I need to know what happened. I can go read the book too, if again, the visual part's going to be even harder. But there's just a reality of this is a real little girl and her mom and this man's wife and these lovely people's daughter and like, it's sickening. And so I realized I have to watch this earlier in the day so that I have time to process it, so that then I can actually rest. So it may even be tweaks like that.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Cause I mean, I have this mentality too. It's like these stories are so important and can lead to increased awareness, like we talked about at the beginning. So again, like it's great to be sharing this. Like, I know that maybe some of these documentary makers, like, I don't know necessarily what their goal is, but I'm glad that awareness is out there. But again, like we've talked about, it just has to be done responsibly. So just to kind of summarize, like the things we've said.
Watch responsibly. That's a good tagline for this.
Don't be a non-consensual show sharer.
I love that you're coining that term, Kat. I really see you pushing that out there.
I think I just was doing it a lot. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's affecting my loved ones.
That's good. That's why this matters, is it really does impact real people. And so it's a good wake-up call to realize what we watch and how we respond to it matters. In fact, we are considering popping on to periodically review some of these new series. We've mentioned several specifically, some you may know or not have known about yet. But as those drop, there could be great purpose in pointing out the real life in them based on, all that we know and see here at beEmboldened. So if that sounds interesting to you, if that's something you'd like for us to do, please leave a comment letting us know. We'd love to consider maybe doing that if that's helpful for people.
Yeah, that's something Kat and I were chatting about was, it could be cool to hop on once in a while if we've jointly watched something and talk about here's where it connects to reality. Again, this is what we see in the work that beEmboldened is doing, maybe crossing over to what Kat, you're doing, not only with beEmboldened, but with Fierce Freedom. And so, being able to take a look at what are some of the big themes that we see and the reality and how this relates to very real things still going on right now, because sometimes the documentaries are from incidents that have happened previously, tragedies that have happened previously, but talking about here's the ripple effect and here's the overlap. So maybe bringing more life and helping people to connect to it. That would be my hope for those episodes, would be not really reviewing like, was this good or was this bad, but here's some recommendations if you're going to watch it, and here's some things to really tune into. Again, helping to connect people to that content more, to that reality more, in a way that isn't going to make them feel so connected that they are feeling a sense of trauma themselves. So let us know if you'd like us to do that.
Well, thanks all for joining. Naomi, Kat, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I hope this was helpful. Again, this was kind of an impromptu, let's talk about this. We've been dialoguing about it back and forth already. I'm like, gosh, I really want to kind of give people a caution. Please be careful with this. Seriously, it can impact your soul. You can just have like a soul impact to watching too much of this. Whether it numbs you out or whether it like overly keys you in and you're having nightmares every night. So just please be careful, take it slow, set up some just regular boundaries that you're going to have where you're like, I'm just going to stick with this. Here's kind of my protocol. And again, know your motivation for watching it. If it's entertainment, ask yourself some follow-up questions. If you've got a reason that you want to dive in, I would stick toes in repeatedly versus actually diving. So and as always, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to connect with you if you have specific questions on how to apply this to your life.
Yeah. I totally agree. Like we were saying, rest is a discipline. Make sure you make space to lament and feel the feelings, and don't judge yourself for feeling that way. You're a human being. I think to be fully integrated, we need to make that space for ourselves and for other people as well. So again, like just thinking of how this is going to impact you and thinking how that will in turn impact your world and your community. I mean, that can be a good thing, right? Like that can be, if you're watching something that's really lighting a fire in you and it's causing you to want to do something, that's awesome. So again, this is really powerful and it can be used in a really amazing way. But again, we're looking out for you because we have been burned like in some ways by it. And so we want everyone to just be cautious and be, again, responsible. But yeah, like also seeing the benefits of it too.